Thursday, May the 17th, so it must be budget day. Indeed, Finance Minister Grant Robertson will deliver what is going to be the first Labour budget in nearly a decade. Health, education, housing, all the usual big areas of spending will loom large. They've been pitching this as fixing 9 years of neglect under National. National, of course, hotly disputes that tag. Let's talk now to Jane Patterson, who's, of course, our political editor, and to our economics correspondent, Patrick Omeara, about what we might expect when we all file in there and open up the papers today in the budget lockup. Not far to go. So let's start with you, Jane. I guess a lot of the money was spent in that mini budget. We were talking, actually, all of us off air, about that families package. It's about $5.5 billion, so that's big money there. What has Grant Robertson got left to play with?
So he's got about $6.6 billion over 4 years. And that leaves about $1.6 billion, which actually isn't a huge amount when you look at all of the demands across all of those big portfolios. Now, that does not include anything in the coalition deals, and of course some big wins in there for the likes of New Zealand First with the Provincial Growth Fund and the families package. That's all accounted for. So what we're going to see is how Grant Robertson allocates that $1.6 billion a year, and I think that does not include either the foreign affairs allocation, that big chunk of change given to MFAT and Pacific Aid last week. That's right, over 4 years. So, those promises and demands are really starting to chip away at that. Although Grant Robertson has inherited a surplus, the books are looking even better since that mini budget, with about nearly $1 billion extra in revenue. But I imagine that some of that will be squirreled away for contingency, although that probably will give him a little bit more room to play with. Remember too, nurses, midwives, all of those pay claims also have to come out of that 1.6 as well.
So there's a lot of people with their hand out. We'll talk about the fiscal situation shortly, because that looms in the background. This goes right to the heart of the government's economic credibility and the promises they've made about their budget responsibility rules. But let's talk about the things that they may be, I suppose, trying to spring in terms of surprises. Are there areas you think that might make a good hit for them in terms of putting forward initiatives that we haven't had signalled yet?
There's been a bit of talk about maybe dental, something in that area, nothing specific. That could be an area where maybe subsidies are increased. It's free dental for up to 13 at the moment, so that they could move in that area. I suppose there are the GP visits and all of that sort of thing, that promises have to be brought back. So a lot of the political argument has been about priorities. The ideological position in part of this government is putting much more money into those public services. So that does constrain them in terms of big bang surprises. And the Prime Minister, even at the start of the week, saying, no, there won't be too many surprises. It's going to be quite boring. But you would have thought that a new government's going to pull something out of the hat.
Yeah, and you talked about constraints. Patrick, let's bring you in there. The constraints are self-imposed in many ways, aren't they, with these budget responsibility rules?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that obviously this is to an audience that Mr Robertson is playing, such as business, who obviously have been very out of sorts since Labour have come to power. And I guess just a continuation, just to prove that they can be that prudent fiscal manager as well. So they want to keep running surpluses. They want to keep this. They want to get net debt down to 20% by 2022. They want to keep government spending overall under 30% of GDP, where it has been for the last few years. Of course, some actually argue that these constraints shouldn't be there, that in fact because of this, if you say that we've had 9 years of neglect, why don't you use some of that fiscal firepower that you have to get out there and actually try and really fix some of these issues that they've got?
And the answer to that is what? They simply believe that their credibility is too fragile in that respect, and that they have to actually deliver on that. They have to stick within those rules.
I think that's part of it. I think that hopefully I am speaking into this. The second thing is that that while they do want to maintain that credibility, and in fact, I don't think they've necessarily got a problem, because even credit rating agencies overseas actually think, well, actually, you spend a bit more. We're not particularly concerned about that. But I think the other thing that they want to do with this in particular is just to make sure that if they do have any problems down the line, and this is of course the line echoed by Bill English, is that they do have this room for any economic shock that may be out there.
So this is, I mean, we've seen things like M. bovis and other things that just creep up. You've got to have something in there for the contingency funds, don't you?
That's right, and as I said, that extra $910 million will come in very handy, because that does give Grant Robertson just that little bit of room to put some of that money away. And of course, we remember Stephen Joyce's fiscal hole argument over the election. Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson fought really hard in that political space to assure people that Labour are and have been good economic managers, so they will not be wanting to take everything right up to the line and leave nothing.
It's close to the line in some areas already, is it not? I mean, some of these promises, I mean, they'll deny they're broken promises, but they're being managed down, aren't they? The winter housing payment's going to be a bit late. The GP visit is not going to happen quite as quickly as they had hoped. So
some questions about police numbers as well. And when you're dealing with such big promises to restore funding in health and education, really that does limit you in those other policies, where in some budgets they might be more personally targeted, if I can put it like that. So the tax cuts that would have happened under National, probably a little bit more voter friendly in terms of people actually being able to see that money go directly into their pocket. But of course, remember, we have the families package, and that's going to deliver some pretty significant increases from July to lower income families, so much more targeted package under this government. But that will be funded, that will be in the budget, but won't actually kick in until the 1st of July.
Let's talk about the economy in general and then come back finally and talk about the marketing of the budget. Patrick, the general economic direction, it looks pretty good. I mean, unemployment is 4.4%, it's the lowest in a decade. The wage growth hasn't really been there, but the economy's humming along all right.
No, that's right, and very much driven by the sort of things that Grant Robertson has been actually saying we need to get away from, population growth. He actually wants to rebuild this economy and turn it somewhere else. In the meantime, obviously, where it's going at the moment is very good. We've got booming tourism still. We have got the population growth, so households are spending.
You'll be looking for the forecast for immigration in the budget today?
Look, even there, you'd have to say that it's been falling, but very, very gradually. Do you know? And so that it is still going to be a major fillip for the economy. It's going to underpin that. And remember, we've still got very low interest rates. They are there. Our terms of trade are high. We are seeing very good prices for our export commodities. So yes, it is a good, strong economy that will continue to underpin the government's books. So they should still be good. As we've seen from the government themselves, they are going to reprioritise some funding, about $700 million away from what they consider to be low areas of priority to higher any.
Well, it's never a low area of priority for the person who's losing it, though, is it? So watch for that one.
Well, actually, one of the interesting things I thought that we hear, and again, it seems to be an echo from National, is that Grant Robertson in previous speeches has talked about actually the quality, as you were pointing out, of just our baseline funding. It's not necessarily just looking at the new money that's actually going out there, the $2.8 billion this year and the $1.9 roughly for the next 3 years that was announced in the mini budget. But actually he's saying we want to make sure that we're getting good quality spending from that baseline as well. Now, doesn't that sound like Bill English to you when he kind of says those sort of things?
Bill English with a red tie. Let's finish on the marketing of it, Jane, the politics of it, because it's a political document as much as an economic document, really. We've had some phrases, rebuilding, the squeezed middle we're starting to hear about. What's the political motivation and aim today, do you reckon?
It is to satisfy those political demands in those big areas, that the health, the education and the housing, to make sure that there is enough money in there to be able, hand on heart for Labour, to say we've put some pretty serious cash into these areas. Now, of course, we've heard we've had these huge surprises in these portfolios. And I mean, some of them, for example, have been created by Labour's change in policy. So take Dunedin Hospital, for example. They decided not to do a public-private partnership. So the cost is going to lay with the government. That's going to be a cost that wouldn't have otherwise have happened. We have education with Chris Hipkins saying we've got this massive spike because of population demand, whereas National had been clearly planning for population growth. So you have these arguments, and I do not think it's fair to say say that National did nothing. Maybe the degrees of what they did could absolutely be argued, but it's a matter of, and I'm echoing Simon Bridges here, but it is a matter of priorities in a lot of these things. It's what do you choose to spend your money on? What do you think is important? Now, the government has already given National some targets. That massive foreign affairs allocation to the Minister, Winston Peters, the Provincial Growth Fund. You are seeing here Labour as well giving some money and giving some big credits to their coalition partners. So that's all part of the mix as well.
All right, we'll hear from more throughout the day from both of you. I'm sure, Susie, you're hosting a budget special this afternoon.
Yeah, 2:00.
2:00. So tune into that. That was our political editor, Jane Patterson, and our economics correspondent, Patrick Omeara, on the budget. It's 21 minutes past 7.
An unemployed man has been told to quit his free night class.